Now, there's a lot of debate on what makes the best chocolate chip cookie, but honestly, it's really about preference. It's kind of like pizza, right? You have New York style, you have thin crust, you have Neapolitan or Chicago and Detroit. It really comes down to what you're looking for in a cookie and or pizza, but really we're just gonna talk about cookies today. Today we're going to talk about how to perfect the chocolate chip cookie, but most importantly, how to perfect your chocolate chip cookie. Because again, everybody likes their own different things. So I'm going to set you up with the tools and knowledge on what makes a chewier cookie, a gooier cookie, a crispier cookie, a softer cookie, a fudgier cookie, all of it, we're going to cover it. We're going to cook the same recipe 3 different ways, just so I can show you comparison side by side, how tweaking little things can change the outcome of your cookie. I'm also going to show you some Michelin tricks on how to get that sexy cookie that we're always chasing. So all of our recipes are going to start off with 2 sticks of softened butter, a half a cup of granulated sugar, and 3/4 cups of packed brown sugar, 1 large egg, 1/4 teaspoon baking soda, and then a 1/2 teaspoon baking powder. And lastly, 1 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour, sifted. If your flour has been sitting on the shelf for a while, it could kind of get a little stale as it's just sitting there exposed to air, especially if you're keeping your flour in its paper bag and not transferring it into some sort of plastic non-porous container. Your flour needs to be sifted just so it can kind of lighten up a little bit and come back alive. And then lastly, you need 12 ounces of chocolate chips. You can use a chocolate bar. I like 70%, or you can use chocolate chips, semi-sweet, whatever you have, that's fine. So there's a few different ways you could begin to make cookies. Most of all cookies, I'd say about 90% of them, they all begin with what's known as the creaming method. This is when you take your butter and your sugar and you smooth them out until completely homogeneous. They become slightly white, airy, and fluffy. Now, previously discussed in our cooking lubes episode, right, talking about all those fats, if your butter isn't at room temperature, you can easily just submerge it in a container of room temperature water and let that rock out for about 5 minutes to come to room temperature. So I have my butter softened right here in this bowl. We're gonna pop that right onto our stand mixer. We're using the paddle attachment. Let this beat and smooth out for about 60 seconds. Next, we're gonna take our sugars, both white and brown, and we're going to add them to our mixer. For the creaming process, you wanna smooth this out for about 3 to 4 minutes. It really depends on the ratio of the sugars that you're using, white to brown, as well as how softened your butter was to begin with. Now, something you're gonna see almost all recipes talk about is constantly scraping down the sides of your bowl. If you want this to be completely homogeneous and have everything evenly mixed, you have to make sure everything is being treated properly and invited to the show. What do I mean by that? Well, the guys hanging out on the outside may not be getting hit by the beater on the bottom. The last thing you want to do is be scooping out your cookies and then hit a pocket of flour that could have baking soda, powder, salt, any sort of crucial ingredient in there that you may have missed and not have incorporated entirely. You want to make sure that's all scooped out. Now, with the creaming method, there's always a sequence. Butters and sugar, creamed. Add your egg and your flavoring, maybe vanilla extract, boom. Then once that is also completely homogeneous, you can now add your dry ingredients, your flour, baking soda, baking powder, salt, whatever it may be. Now, one of the biggest tips that I can give you, just to kind of shed some knowledge on you on how this works, is how to manipulate the texture of your cookie, right? Starting with brown sugar and white sugar. Brown sugar is going to give you a more chewier cookie, where white sugar is going to give you a more crispier edge of your cookie. I'm talking about like around the perimeter. You're gonna make this cookie recipe at least once before veering off and doing your own thing to kind of see where you stand with this cookie. Is it perfectly chewy? Could it be chewier? Do you prefer it that way? Do you want it like this? Manipulating the sugar content and which sugars you're using is going to change that outcome. Now, keep the same sugar equation, right? The quantity of the sugar needs to stay the same, but you can kind of move that needle back and forth, whether you want to add more brown sugar or if you want to add more white sugar. You can kind of give and take. They do work equally in this sense, but only in this sense, okay? Just a splash of vanilla extract. You're really not going to over add this, so just eyeball it. I usually go right in the cap. 1 capful is usually Gucci. That's like a teaspoon or so. Guess what? Yeah, we're scraping it down, baby. All right, next we have our dry ingredients. So I have baking soda, baking powder, and salt right here, going straight in. I like to add this separately because almost always these stupid bowls aren't designed great to be pouring things in on top of them, right? So when I come in with my flour, just in case I get a little extra flour that might not have made it into the bowl, flour is okay. It's not super imperative. It'll still get where it needs to go. But let's say in that little bit, I drop some baking soda or baking powder. That could be very important and crucial to how the outcome of our cookie is going to turn out. So I don't want to lose any of that. I want to ensure all of that is in the bowl. So I add that first separately. Add all of our flour in. You see what I'm saying? I wasn't lying. When your flour is about like 75% incorporated, you can still see a little bit up top and around here. That's totally fine. Stop your mixer, drop it, give it a scrape. When you over mix flour into your cookie dough, that's when you get a tough cookie or a cookie that crumbles too hard, if that makes any sense. That's the enemy. We don't want that at all. We want a soft, gentle, supple cookie. One that is going to kiss your lips with buttery crunchness. That's what we're chasing. Give this a nice scrape, making sure that we don't over mix here. Chips. I'm going to use the rest of this bag. This is a 22-ounce bag. And it was about halfway there. So like that's where we want it to be, right? So that's using chocolate chips. Let this go for like 10 seconds. And we're done, just like that. Cookie dough, beautiful. Look at that, God. Scrape this down. Can you eat raw cookie dough? I mean, yeah, if it's worth risking a tummy ache, which it almost always is. Eggs are the issue that people freak out about when you're eating raw cookie dough. I mean that, and you're eating a bunch of just straight up butter, which could be gross, depending on which house you're in. Now, the constant that we're gonna have across all 3 of these recipes is that they all have to be chilled before we bake them. Why do we chill them? It is not to solidify the butter, although solidifying the butter does help because cooking it from a chilled state is going to leave the inside cooking last, giving you like a more gooier texture in the middle, which is fantastic. I love that. That's a great cookie. The real reason on why we refrigerate is because we need to give all of those flour particles a moment to hydrate. And on top of that, we have chemical leaveners. We'll have an episode on leaveners, maybe, who knows, down the line. But to run through them briefly, you have 2 types of leaveners. You have natural leaveners and you have chemical leaveners. Natural leaveners is like yeast. Water is even a natural leavener. As it is cooking or heating up, it is evaporating, giving off steam, and that steam could help leaven pastries, kind of like croissants, right? That is a laminated dough. It has very thin layers of butter running through it. When that butter starts to melt and the water evaporates, it gives off steam and gives off lift and heft to our pastries. Boom. Natural leavener. Chemical leaveners, on the other hand, are like your baking soda and baking powder. They are not instant. They take a moment to become activated. They need to be hydrated. Also chilling our butter to hydrate all those flour particles completely and activate our chemical leaveners. For flour hydration, it actually happens very slowly. We need anywhere between 8 to 12 hours on this cookie dough. I just tell people, make your dough the day before, and then it'll be ready to bake the next day. So we're gonna pre-scoop all of these cookies, chill them overnight, and then bake them tomorrow and then have our comparison. So when you're scooping, I like to come flush off the side of the bowl, just like this. And then these can actually touch because we're not cooking them like this. They don't need room to spread. They're just going in the fridge. So it's going to start off a lot similar than the first recipe did, right? I have 2 sticks of softened butter. If you want a higher fat content, a more like caramelized butter taste on your palate, you can use better butter, grass-fed butter, Kerrygold butter, Polgro European style butter would be the ideal butter to use. that shit's very expensive. And I'm not gonna show you very expensive butter 3 different ways. We're just going to use standard butter with what you would most likely be using at home. But if you want my advice for butter, yes, go for European style butter. It's going to yield a much better cookie. Have you ever seen like those super thick cookies, like those Levain cookies, right? In New York City, super viral. There's been tons of copycats around the country trying to do the same exact thing. How do they get a cookie that fat and soft on the inside? Well, they're starting with a chilled dough, as we know. They're using a huge mound, so as it is slowly starting to melt, the butter in the middle is still solidified, giving you that like medium rare cookie. They're also adding cornstarch to their cookie dough. And the reason being, it's going to help hold on to that butter a little bit longer without letting it run out on your pan and from the cookie itself. So it almost kind of like delays that timing of it softening and kind of oozing out on itself, giving you like that nice chewy center on a cookie. They're delicious, and I do enjoy them from time to time, but that's not my optimal cookie. That's not what we're chasing. So I wanted to touch base so you know, and you can kind of change it and use that tip. But again, that's not what we're gonna do today. Scrape your bowl down. Another important factor of how your cookies are going to spread is actually in your baking soda. Baking soda does this really cool thing with fats and proteins that it is going to help determine how fast and how dark something is actually going to brown. You may have seen that tip of putting baking soda on the outside of marinades for proteins and stuff like that. Kind of help with that Maillard reaction, the browning of the proteins on the outside. Baking soda in your cookies kind of does the same thing. It also slows them down from running out too fast. So same thing, if you didn't want to use cornstarch, but you still kind of want to slow this down, you can up the baking soda in your recipe to help control the rate at which your cookies spread. Something we are going to do different in these cookies that we didn't do in the last cookies is we're going to add an ingredient called non-fat milk powder. What this is exactly what it sounds like. It is dehydrated non-fat milk. So all of the water content has been completely taken away. Hey now. And all we are really left with is butter fat. So we are adding extra butter fat without adding extra moisture or water to our cookies. This is going to make a more crumbly, unctuous cookie, completely changing the texture and making them more delicious. You can even go one step further and caramelize this for an extra layer of umami and flavor. Going right back in with some salt, baking soda, baking powder, keeping the same amounts for that as you see. But again, when you're making your own cookies, try switching out the baking soda and baking powder proportions. Swap them. See if that does anything different for you. Maybe you prefer that kind of thinner cookie, or maybe you want the thicker cookie and you keep the baking soda the way it is. I don't know, man. It's your show too. I completely forgot to tell you something. I swapped the brown sugar and the white sugar amounts on this recipe. That is one of the extra variables for cookie number 2. So essentially, instead of having 3/4 brown sugar, we have 3/4 white sugar and only a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. So we swap that just so we can kind of see, does it really give you a chewier outside? I don't know, I do know, but you're gonna find out. Just eyeball it. It's part of the fun of baking. I'll show you what we'll do in the next batch of cookies, but seriously, you can't go wrong. Can't add too many chocolate chip cookies. So for this recipe, I want to get as weird as possible on you, just to show you the possibility of how great of a cookie we could achieve. 235 grams of browned butter, softened brown butter. You'll notice in color, it's already going from like that nice golden brown to a lighter white already. We're gonna go in with our sugar. I have the same sugar from the last cookie, not the first cookie. So we have 3/4 cup of white sugar and a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. Because now we're really just kind of like comparing these last 2 cookies, since these are the cookies that I'm messing with. Give it a nice little shapoopy. Nice, nice. 1 egg. Let that kind of just come together. Give it a nice little scrape. Milk powder, yet again. Baking soda, baking powder, and our kosher salt. And then I have my flour. All of it going right in. For our super sexy chocolate chip cookie, I am going to be using 70% chocolate. I like the shards of the bar in our cookie. I think it adds like some texture, a little bit of character. You get these nice ooey gooey pockets. It's super interesting. I'm actually going to add a mix of the two just because I'm going to be short 3 ounces of this. You don't want to make it too fine, right? Also, I'm going to add it to this mixing bowl. The bowl is going to break up the pieces a little bit further. If I really finely chopped it up on my board, I'm gonna have all of these tiny little pieces of chocolate that are then going to like litter our cookie. And now you get like almost a chocolate cookie. I don't want that. I want little pockets and surprises of chocolate and chocolate chips. Another technique that you can use like a strainer or even like a salad spinner. Throw all of the chocolate in there and just kind of like shake it out like you're panning for gold. So like, I don't know if you could see, you see like all these little pieces here, these shards, that dust, I'm leaving that behind. I'm not bringing it in. I also have some chocolate chips, so we're going to have a little bit of contrast between the two and the shards and the chocolate chips. I just needed the difference in that chocolate. You can hear it breaking up those bigger pieces, that's totally fine. I tasted all 3 of these doughs. They're all delicious. But this one tastes like money. Does that make sense? It tastes luxurious. It tastes like $14 in Rockefeller Center, New York City type good. You know what I mean? Like, that's special. If you go the extra mile and try that, you're not gonna be disappointed. You ready for the boss level tip? You got your scooper? I got some extra little chocolate shards here. I'm gonna take some of these chocolate shards and I'm gonna put them in my scooper, just like that. Then I'm going to scoop our cookie dough, leveled off, just like that. But now every scoop is going to have some clusters of chocolate right on top. So every single cookie is going to have that perfect chocolate window right on top. So again, you could take all 3 of these different ideas, tips and tricks from each cookie and make a mega cookie. You could pick and choose whatever you'd like, but if you take any tip, this tip right here, this tip's gonna change the game for all your cookies, regardless of which type of style you go with. We have cookie 1, our controlled variable, very standard. Cookie number 2, a little bit different in our sugars, added some milk powder in there as well. And then cookie number 3, brown butter crumbs, nice big chocolate chunks, and then finishing with a little bit of chocolate in our scoop. I am so excited to see how these are gonna turn out. Throw them in the fridge for at least 12 hours, best overnight. I'll see you tomorrow. Good morning, we're back. It's tomorrow. Going in a 375-degree oven for about 9 or 12 minutes. It depends on the size you chose for your actual cookies, as well as how many you are putting on your physical sheet. Now, you can bake this with parchment paper, not a problem. I am using what's known as a silpat, or what we like to call This is called a silpat. What is a silpat? It is essentially a silicone baking mat. I like silpats for a few reasons. The biggest one is probably because they're sustainable. I don't have to keep using parchment paper or wax paper and over again. I can reuse these a million times. They're perfect. They're dishwasher safe, which is fantastic. And it's silicone, so I'm not too worried about microplastics. The other reason why I like them is their durability. They're a little bit more on the thicker side. So if I was coming in with like a spatula and I needed to like pick something up, or if I needed to like roll a roulade or something like that, this has some body to it. It's not going to start moving all around when you get like a spatula underneath, which could come into an issue with some flimsy parchment paper. So, silpats. We're only gonna bake 4 cookies of each today, because if I have cookies in this house, they're all going to be eaten, and I can't get fat doing this show. I like to kind of like just roll them out a little extra, give them a little more shape, make them a little more rounded, so you don't get this weird thin edge on your cookie. You see like from when we were scooping, the release. Okay. I am going to do something different though. We're gonna keep 2 cookies normal, regular, right out of the fridge, straight onto our baking sheet before they go in the oven. And then for the other 2 cookies, I'm just gonna take my hand and I'm going to gently press down to kind of give them like a head start on separating. I want to see if this is going to help give us a more consistent cookie, a rounder cookie, or whatever it may be. So we have the regular standard tall cookie and then a slightly flattened cookie like so. These are going to go in a 375-degree oven for 9 or 12 minutes. So our cookies have been in the oven for about 11 minutes now. Let's take a look. Whenever you open an oven, give it a second. All that built up heat and the steam needs to kind of release, otherwise you're gonna get a rough facial. Nice. So sometimes when they have a bit of a belly, I like to kind of just tamper them down just a bit. These are our cookies. They look sexy. I love them. These were the ones that we just kind of left as is. Rather, these are the ones we kind of gave it a little assist to. Let me press them down just a bit. We're gonna give these about 5 to 8 minutes of carrying over on the tray, and then I'm going to remove them off of the tray and put them onto a cooling rack. The reason being is I don't want these cookies to overcook too much. They are still cooking in contact with the hot pan. It's called carryover cooking. To keep these all consistent, we're going to rest them for about 5 minutes on the sheet tray before moving them onto a cooling rack. What's a cooling rack, you may ask? This is a cooling rack, by the way. Same thing, we're just gonna kind of help out the edges a little bit. So this cookie is almost the same, except it has the addition of milk powder. We also switched up the sugars and kept the baking powder and baking soda the same. Again, baking powder and baking soda, especially when it comes to cookies, they have more than just the expansion, right? It's gonna be more than a leavener in our cookie. The baking soda is actually going to help with color, where the baking powder is actually going to help with the texture of our cookie. It's going to yield a softer crumb texture on the center of our cookie. The other way to achieve that is keeping the same exact recipe, but you can swap AP flour for bread flour, or even do half AP flour and half bread flour. The left side I'm going to keep as is, where the right side we're going to give just that little assist. And then I have some Maldon salt, some flaky salt, that forms these little prisms as it is drying. So you get these nice wide flakes. It disperses well on your palate, really just exploding with flavor. It also adds a little texture, which is nice. We're going to add the sea salt to all of our cookies. This is just an upgrade. I do this to every cookie, to be honest. We're gonna do 11 minutes on these cookies. So we have our first round of cookies cooling here on this rack. You see this little divot, the indent? The cookie kind of collapsed on itself. So I'm assuming it was very soft on the inside, and as it started drying or cooling, the crust on the outside wasn't strong enough to support it, so it started collapsing on itself. That is not a bad thing. This makes me feel like we're going to have a super chewy cookie, and I'm about that. Whereas these cooled nice and even and flat. I'm excited to dig into these to compare the same cookie just baked whole or smushed. I think that's pretty interesting. Cookie number 2. If you're looking for a consistent radius on your cookie, here's a neat little trick for you. I have just like a cookie cutter or a biscuit cutter. I'm inverting it. I'm not using the sharp side, I'm using the dull side. And I'm kind of just going to go around our cookie in this ring shape like this to make sure the whole thing is nice and tight and we have like the same consistent shape on all of our cookies. We're gonna let these cool in the tray for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So for our final cookie, level 3, we have these brown butter cookies. All right, you know the drill. 4 cookies. The 2 on the left are going to stay consistent. We're gonna leave them as is, versus the 2 on the right, we're gonna give a little bit of an assist to here and squish it down. We're gonna hit it again with our sea salt. I think the sea salt with that brown butter, it's just gonna pop. Now, we are gonna do one thing differently with these cookies, right? The butter is already browned. It's already been cooked, it's been toasted, it's delicious. It's very delicate, you need to be careful. We have already evaporated a lot of water from our butter. We also added more butter fat through the milk powder. So with that in mind, these are going to take faster to cook, faster to brown. I don't want these in a 375-degree oven. The edges are going to start burning a lot quicker than the center of the cookie will be finished. So we are actually going to bake these brown butter cookies at 350 degrees for about 12 to 14 minutes. We're gonna keep an eye on them around that 10, 11 minute mark. So I think the biggest difference in these cookies right off the bat, other than their visual appearance around the edges, is their height. These cookies, batch number 2, are a little bit taller than batch number 1. I believe that is because of the addition of not only the milk fat powder, but also the brown sugar that we changed. Notice we have a taller cookie, leading me to believe that we will have a chewier cookie, compared to a flatter cookie, which is most likely going to yield a crispier cookie. Level 3. Wow. The smell right now out of this oven is intoxicating. I want sexy cookies. We're gonna do the cookie cutter trick. okay? If your cutter is smaller than your cookie, just kind of like bounce your cookie around, ha-ha, ha-ha, to kind of get into that shape. That's the point of what we're doing here, right? If you're gonna do anything, do it right. Batch number 1, no assist with the assist. What do you notice? This one's a little bit larger, a little rounder. This one's a little bit thicker, just like that. You see? You see that? Wow. Very tender, very soft, a little bit chewy. That's the first cookie. How do we go up from here? Let's dive into the same cookie, but with the assist. Ooh, 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 ooh. Now comparing these two cookies side by side, no assist with the assist, you can kind of tell here that the one with no assist is a little chewier on the inside versus the one with the assist. That's a solid cookie. Crispier edge, not as chewy. That's a great cookie. Listen, if you only got into the first 4 minutes of this video, you're fine. That cookie slaps. You're good. That's really good. Same thing. Chewy center on the inside. Wow. All right. Sea salt on your cookies makes the world of difference. Yes, this was fantastic, but the elevation you get on your palate with that little bit of salt, you can't replace that. That's a must across the board. So put that down on your notes. All cookies need a little bit of that. The crumb is fantastic. The sweetness, you can tell you switched those sugars around. This one was a little bit chewier. This one is a little bit crispier, but like somehow a little lighter. And I think that's due to the milk powder that we put in here. Same cookie, level 2, no assist with the assist. This one obviously is a little rounder, we're finding, right? But it's also not as tall, so. This works. This is definitely the step above. Both in appearance, it looks better. That sea salt makes the world of difference. And again, like they're chewier, but somehow lighter. That's number 1 right now. That's a perfect cookie. Last but not least, we have our brown butter babies. Oof, look at that, with these nice little chocolate chunk windows peeking through. Look, this should probably cool for like another 20 minutes or so, so those chocolate chip, the top kind of solidifies a little bit. We're not gonna do that, because I'm a little impatient and I like warm cookies. I got a glass of milk here, come on now. Ready? Wow. Ooh, what is that? Oh my gosh. The smell of these cookies are outrageous. Whoa. Yeah, same. That's an experience. That's special. Pros and cons though, I'm gonna give it to you straight. Flavor-wise, 30 out of 10. Ousts all of these. Texture-wise, it's a little bit more on the crumbly side. I'd probably put it at maybe like an 8 out of 10, especially in comparison to these, where this would be a 10 out of 10. Oh my gosh. This is a very rich cookie. I could have one of these after dinner and be fine. This is not I can sit here and eat 30 of these cookies. This is a special treat, a luxury, if you will. You're indulging in something rich and excellent. Enjoy yourself. This cookie, on the other hand, number 2, I gotta be honest, yes, the flavor is good. It might not be as luxurious as this, but this is the cookie I can sit here and eat a whole dozen of, no problem. So what did we learn? Well, brown sugar is going to give you a chewier cookie versus white sugar is going to give you a crispier cookie on your outside. You really don't need to worry about pressing or assisting your cookies down, as we find that leaving the cookie whole as like a big mound to melt on its own in the oven is going to yield a chewier inside, while still giving you that crispy outside. We also learned that bread flour can actually yield to a softer center and a better crumb to your cookie, but again, that's totally by preference. Baking powder will also help tenderize the inside of your cookie, versus baking soda will actually help brown the outside of your cookie. As always, thanks again for tuning in. If you've made it this far, come on, just like, comment, subscribe. You don't want to miss another recipe. We got something fun lined up for you guys next time. We'll see you soon.